Ukrainian drones attacked Moscow for the second consecutive night, halting flights at 4 airports in the Russian capital as it prepares to host a major military parade expected to be attended by world leaders. Flights were suspended as a safety precaution at 4 of the capital's airports, according to Russian aviation authorities. 3 Moscow international airports, Vnukovo, Domodedovo and Zhukovsky, have temporarily suspended the reception and departure of aircraft. This was reported by the head of the press service of Rosaviatsia, Artem Korenyakov, on his Telegram channel. The drone threat triggered temporary shutdowns at the region's Vnukovo, Domodedovo, Zhukovsky and Sheremetyevo airports. In addition to all 4 Moscow airports, restrictions were also introduced at the Grabtsevo airport in Russia's Kaluga Oblast. Airports are temporarily not accepting or sending flights, the agency's representative wrote. The devices launched at Moscow were among 105 Ukrainian drones intercepted across Russia overnight, Russia's defense ministry said on Telegram. The Moscow mayor, Sergei Sobyanin, said at least 19 Ukrainian drones approached Moscow from different directions. 3 social media sites with links to Russian security services, Baza, Mash and Shot, said one drone struck an apartment building near a major road in the south of the capital, smashing windows. There were no reports of casualties, both they and Sobyanin said. Specialists from the emergency services are working at the sites where the incidents occurred, Sobyanin said. The mayor referred to debris falling on one of the key highways leading into the city, but made no mention of a dwelling being hit. RBC writes that in connection with the attacks, flights were temporarily suspended at 13 airports, including Moscow ones. A Nesma Airlines plane from Hurghada landed in St. Petersburg. Passengers said that they spent more than 10 hours in the cabin without water and food, and they could not agree on refueling. In Voronezh region, that borders Ukraine in Russia's southwest, at least 18 drones were reported, the regional governor said. Ukraine says its drone strikes are aimed at destroying infrastructure, key to Moscow's overall war efforts, and are in response to Russia's continued assault on Ukrainian territory, including residential areas and energy infrastructure. The reported attack comes the same week of Russia's May 9th Victory Day celebrations, which mark the Soviet Union's role in defeating Nazi Germany in World War II. The Kremlin has invited foreign guests to attend Moscow's Victory Day parade, though many Western officials have declined. Russian President Vladimir Putin also unilaterally declared a humanitarian truce from midnight May the 8th to midnight May the 11th. President Volodymyr Zelensky has dismissed the proposal as a theatrical performance, accusing Putin of manipulating the international community by declaring brief ceasefires that it has no intention of following. Ukraine has agreed to a US-proposed ceasefire on all hostilities for 30 days, but Russia continues to refuse. The US is once again calling on Russia to stop its aggression against Ukraine and conclude a peace agreement, but the Kremlin continues to block any efforts in this direction. As Bild reports, a new, rather alarming suspicion has arisen among Western political circles. If the war ends, Vladimir Putin's regime could face serious domestic political challenges. The reason is that Moscow has not yet realized its strategic military goals. Meanwhile, Russia's military-industrial complex has been expanded by massive state injections. Hundreds of thousands of citizens receive a stable income thanks to the war. These circumstances make it much more difficult for Putin to compromise. The question arises, what will be the consequences for Russia if the hostilities end? Recently, Russian economists have stated, If we consider the dynamics of industrial production without taking into account sectors with a dominant share of the military-industrial complex, we can talk about a transition to recession. The country is seeing a decline in production in many industries, from food processing to mechanical engineering. Only the defense industry is showing growth, masking the overall decline. Despite this, economist and former employee of the Central Bank of the Russian Federation, Alexandra Prokopenko, believes that the end of the war will not be a blow to the military industry. In my opinion, the end of the war will not affect the arms industry. The sector will continue to benefit from state needs. Prokopenko argues this as follows. The military needs to replenish its arsenals, which have been significantly reduced or even completely depleted due to the war in Ukraine. Defense manufacturers have invested in expanding their capacity, expecting continued high demand. I doubt that such a bloated military-industrial complex will shrink again. Russia's main adversaries, NATO and EU states, are also discussing increased military spending. Under these conditions, cutting defense spending would be politically unacceptable for Putin. Another potential source of instability could be military personnel returning from the front. Expert Margaret Klein of the Institute for International and Security Affairs warns, dealing with veterans who return after the fighting ends is likely to be a challenge for Putin. The main problem is material, says the expert. Those who went to the front as volunteers, as contract soldiers, or fighters in one of the various volunteer formations often earned many times more than the average wage over several years of war. This is due to increased wages, but above all, to the sometimes very high one-time recruitment bonuses, which can reach more than 40,000 euros. Many of these people, often violent and psychologically traumatized, will return to depressed regions with low living standards. If the state does not provide them with a decent future, this could cause a social tension and an upsurge in violence, the expert noted. Violent crime has increased since the full invasion of Ukraine. Of course, there is a danger that some, for example, returning veterans of Afghanistan and Chechnya, will be drawn into crime.